Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fumey, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have the CEO and founder of Spoiled Rotten Photography, Melissa Tash. Melissa, how are you today?
I am better than I deserve, Frank. How are you?
I'm doing well. That's quite the introduction.
So you don't know Dave Ramsey then?
Yeah, no, I've moved Dave Ramsey. I don't think I've heard that.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Well, I'm honored and grateful to be here. Humbled. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No, it's great to have you on the show. So, I always start with how did things start? So Spoiled Rotten Photography, obviously it's a kids photography franchise, but I want to hear what kind of inspired you to start this. What's the whole genesis of it?
I've always been that person with a camera in my hands, always, but never thought that I could make a living with it. And so many people told you, oh, photography, no, you can't make a living with that. You're smart. You need to be an engineer. Don't be a photographer. Look at everybody around you. Nobody can make a living. So I went down that path, right? I was not a photographer, but always a photographer on the side, an engineer by day, photographer by night. So that kind of kept me busy for a long time. Mm-hmm. But how we actually started?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was taking pictures nights and weekends for friends and family. So when my son was born, I started taking his picture, and then all my friends would see it and go, oh, can you take my kid's picture? I'm like, sure. And this is a familiar story for a photographer. And then when their friends, so friends of friends started asking me to take pictures, I'm like, wait a minute, now I'm sitting my nights and weekends taking your kids' pictures. Maybe we need to start a business. So we started a little business and grew it to be a pretty large custom business. So doing sessions, mostly nights and weekends, keeping the day job because there's no way you can make a great living taking pictures.
Right.
So it all changed one day. I was in my office and a coworker comes in and says, hey, look at this picture. My kid's picture is terrible. And it's at the preschool. And then she said, look at his last year's picture. It looks just like this picture. And they're both terrible. And I have terrible pictures from my preschool. I wish you could take their picture. And I went, well, I can do that. I can take pictures. So I called up the director and I was like, hi, my name is Melissa Tash. And I would, can I take your kids' pictures at your preschool? She's like, sure, our photographer's retiring. And I went, great. Oh. And then I hung up the phone and I went, oh crap.
Be careful what you wish for, right?
How do I do that? That's 120 children. I'm used to photographing 2-3 people a week. And plus I have this amazing day job, which I love. I loved my day job, but I was like, I have no idea how to take a school picture per se. So that became the biggest blessing because what I didn't know was school pictures are terrible and school pictures go really fast. So I just took everything that I'd learned for my custom business and applied it in a volume way. I worked with some really smart people that helped me with some software very early on and brought that custom experience to the preschool. So when the order started coming in and my husband was like, what, how much? We'd open an envelope, pull the check out. And he's like, oh my gosh. We'd open another envelope, pull the check out. Oh my gosh. He's like, well, maybe you have something here.
Right.
I was like, I think we do. And from that first preschool that we ever photographed, we made more from that 3-day session than I did my entire engineering salary.
Oh,
and it was super fun. It was so much fun playing with the kids. So I'm like, maybe I can make this a little bit more efficient and maybe I can do it again.
Right. And
so that was kind of the turning point.
That's amazing. What I love about your story is that you took massive action and you almost you didn't give yourself too much time to think about it. You didn't get in your head. If you would have thought about it too long, you probably wouldn't have done it. But I could see the look on your face where you were I was uh-oh, I can't believe I just signed up for it because you did it. There was no letting fear get in the way.
No, I am a find a way or make one. That's my motto. You just do it. I worked for Nike for a lot of years and that was their logo. I mean, their motto do it, but I mean, I'm an 80% girl. You get an 80% there and then you jump. And then
Right.
you figure out how to improve it from there on.
Maybe we should share with the audience, though, your real background before this whole thing, because you're a tough lady. I mean, you have that wherewithal. I understand you were an Army officer and engineer. You were at NASA, correct?
Right. Well, I was actually a contractor for NASA, but worked on the International Space Station program. So,
Nice.
I mean, the coolest job ever. I got to work directly with astronauts.
Nice. That's
Okay, so
incredible.
you were talking about Anthony behind the scenes and like wanting to see his face. So
Yes.
here's my claim to fame. Are you ready?
Uh-huh.
So I was in the position that got to talk to the space station. So back in the day, there wasn't a lot of cell phones and all that kind of stuff. Like the astronauts now have communication that they can use. But back in the day, you talked to this one particular person called the payload communicator.
Okay.
And so my astronaut wanted to know who he was talking to. So had my picture on the space station. So it rotated the Earth for 3 months.
Oh my goodness. You're the first and probably last person that I'm ever going to talk to that has had that privilege. That's pretty freaking cool.
Like I wasn't microgravity, but my image or my likeness was.
Hey, that's better than 99.9% of all people could ever say on this planet.
It was a great, amazing, fun job too. But I was burning the candle at both ends, like nights and weekends with the photography, and then doing that job during the day. And I had 2 young children, one with special needs, and a husband. Oh yeah, I had a husband too. So it was just a lot. Like something had to give.
Yeah. But how do you think, being in the military, and by the way, thank you so much for your service, between the military and being an engineer, how do you think it prepared you to be an entrepreneur?
Oh my goodness. Well, entrepreneurship is so many things. And I think that a lot of it is just persistence and figuring it out, right? So just staying with it. But I'm an industrial engineer. I love systems and processes. And I even love like writing procedures. So even before we franchised, I already had a manual.
Who smiles about systems and processes? Like no, like nobody.
It makes you more efficient.
It does. No, you're right for franchising. I can see how the story's going to go now. It makes total sense.
Well, and then too, in the Army, you know, if you're not at war, you're training. So training is my background. I love training. I love teaching other people. I love just being able to help other people do something better than they've done it before. So that's just kind of my forte. And, you know, I can't imagine a better job for me.
Oh, that's wonderful. So let's go back to Spoiled Rotten Photography. So you do this entire school, 122 kids, preschool, right? You said.
Preschool, yes.
And where do we go from here?
So after that, well, here's another thing. I'm super dyslexic. I mean, that's my superpower, I think. So I was sitting next to a really smart guy, also working for NASA. And I was like, hey, can you help me with this? Because I made so many mistakes. Like I was placing manual orders to the lab and I'm doing all kinds of stuff, just making mistakes. And it took me a long time to do things. So bringing in systems and processes and automation was like key to that. So once we did that, I was like, oh, I could do this job in half the time that I did it before because it took so much time afterwards. Okay, we can improve this more. Let me do it again. Let me find another school. And word started spreading too. So I started getting more and more accounts and I was still working that job. Like I was still, you know, full time with my job. I was taking vacation to work my photography job. So I had to make it more efficient. And the way I did that was through automation and hiring some really smart people to help me.
Nice.
So just making it bigger and just growing it and making it better each time.
So you were running your photography business for, looks like 10 years, right? Because you founded it in 2003. So for 10 years, you were running it before you franchised. How big was this company-owned location that you had before you franchised? Would you say in like terms of like annual revenue, if you don't mind sharing?
Probably we're at like 60 or 70,000.
Okay. All right. And so what inspired you to franchise this concept?
Well, I had a friend of a friend was like begging me to. He was a photographer. And like I said before, it's like hard for photographers to make a good living. It's just hard because if you're low end, nobody wants you. If you're high end, you have to do tons of marketing. There's no room for the middleman. Like you have to be either super, super high end, do tons of marketing or volume. So he knew what we were doing and he started asking us, hey, can you help me? Can you do this? So we started thinking about, okay, well, maybe we could franchise this, but knew nothing about franchising. Nothing.
Welcome to the club. None of us ever do before we go in.
But Jamie and I, my husband and I started looking at it like, okay, how do we scale? How we know we've got something amazing here. And if you had more time, Melissa, which you don't have any time. If you had more time, you could just replicate what you're doing and make more income. So our margins were great. It was so much fun. And so we had this guy who said he wanted us to help him, but we're like, oh, we're not ready. We're not ready. And then a chance meeting with somebody who he didn't really develop franchises, but he worked for us for many, many years.
Okay.
He was like, oh, I can help you put together an FDD. And I have a friend who's a lawyer. So I was like, well, okay, let's look at franchising. So we decided that that's the model we wanted to go with to expand, because we didn't want to have managers. We wanted people that were invested and that would run their business like they owned it, which, hello, franchising.
Right.
So that's how we decided on the model. We had the guy in Franklin, Tennessee, who wanted help. He was our first proof of concept location, and he just blew it out of the water. Like, he's still with us. He's starting his 11th year. He's our number one franchise, doing fantastic. One of my proudest moments is when he stood up at our franchise conference and he would let me tell the story. He got a little tear. He's a big guy, and he got a little tear in his eye, and he said, I never thought that I would be able to make a living with photography. And just, Melissa and Jamie, thank you so much for franchising, because it has made such a huge difference in my life. And I have just like tons of gratitude towards you guys because of what you've done. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll do this some more.
Right. Isn't that amazing?
It was really good.
Melissa, there's so many guests I've spoken to. They've talked about the genesis of their business, and their why was generally motivating for them to grow their own business. And then they have this aha moment, this realization like you had at your national meeting with your franchisees.
Yeah, there were 4 of us.
Oh, all 4 of you. I've done that before. The little U-shaped table at a little Sheraton Hotel in Orlando was my first one. But you realized that it was much bigger than you.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
the difference, you really impacting people's lives. Not many people realize that before they franchise. Like, oh, I'm going to start this. I'm going to franchise this, and I'm going to change people's lives. Like, that doesn't even occur to us until we're in it. And then you're sucked in. Because once you're in franchising and you're doing the thing that you love and you're changing people's lives, oh, it's over. Right?
It's amazing. Like, I pinch myself, really.
Right.
Like, you get to do this for a living.
Right. Yeah, no, that's incredible. So just to bring everybody up to speed here on your stats. So you have 22 franchises plus 2 company-owned locations, and you guys are across 16 states. That's really impressive. That's fantastic. Let's talk about what makes Spoiled Rotten Photography unique, because there's probably people out there that maybe are interested in being part of your franchise system, and they're probably thinking, okay, it's photography. Like, what does Melissa do that's so different? So would you mind sharing the why and how you guys are different?
Sure. Thanks. Thanks so much for that. So I think that our biggest differentiator is equality. If you look at our school pictures, they are amazing. Like, parents look at them and they're like, these are school pictures? We used to have a little thing on our brochure that went out that says, you don't even have to tell people these are school pictures if you don't want to, because the quality is so good. Like, we have really made that our cornerstone. That's what we compete on, is quality. But the other side of that is, if you ask any teacher or school what picture day is like, they will roll their eyes and say, picture day. It's disruptive. It's just crazy. Like, we hate it. So we coined the phrase Happy Picture Day and have made our own celebration out of Picture Day. So we want it to be joyful, happy, organized. So just changing the narrative of, 1, what a school picture looks like, and 2, the experience that the schools have.
Right.
Pulling those two things together, I think, has just been really popular.
That's so important. I would imagine, me not knowing anything about it, just from what I remember being a kid, is that it sounds like it would be like herding cats.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I pulled back some of my school pictures and I was like, oh.
Now, what about somebody like myself that doesn't have any photography experience other than my iPhone? Am I somebody that could be a franchisee? Like, how can you make somebody like me a franchise owner?
Well, less than half of our owners were photographers before they started.
Okay.
Can I tell you a secret?
Go ahead.
I prefer that.
Okay. Why?
Just because they don't have any preconceived notions of what it's supposed to be like. I can train them on exactly how we want them to do it. Now, don't get me wrong. I love our photographers, the people that have converted their studios to Spoiled Rotten. I love them and they're great. I shouldn't say anything. There's nothing bad about them, but I would say it's a little easier to train the people that haven't already been doing it. You just have to love children, be able to follow a process, be physically able to do it, and then we can teach you. We like to say, if you're hungry, humble, and smart, we got you.
I love it. I get that. And I can relate that to my business because I used to say that my sports business was a blessing and curse. And like similar to what you're saying, the blessing was that in my business, it was sports, so people liked it and they knew something about it. The curse was they knew something about it. So they had a preconceived notion on what they thought it should be run. And my best franchisees were people that did not have tremendous amount of sports experience. They had more of a business acumen. And I would imagine your franchise owners, so you're training them on how to do the photography your way. What are some of the traits though? I want to hear like a day in the life. I have an idea of what they probably do, but I would love to know, what are the traits a franchisee needs to have to be successful?
I would think the biggest thing is just the persistence and the stick-to-itness is the big thing. But we would love for them to have a little bit of sales DNA, like just be able to present themselves in a way that they can create relationships. And of course, they have to 100% like working with kids, because if you're going to enjoy what you're doing, please pick another concept, right?
Right.
So that's the biggest thing, is just loving kids, being able to follow a process, and then actually doing it, just, making sure that you follow the steps that we put before you.
Okay. Is the model strictly mobile, or is there a brick and mortar version?
Right. We are 100% home based. So our margins are fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
In the early years, we've had photographers or franchise owners are like, hey, I want to open this location. I'm like, okay, let's run the numbers. And then they're like, quickly, oh, maybe we should just stay mobile. Yeah, I think we should stay mobile.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. The magic of your business is that you go to the people instead of them coming to you. You can service so many more people when you go to them.
Yes, absolutely. And we're going to schools where a typical preschool between 60 and 120. Typically, I would say that most of them are at 120 kids. Some of the larger ones up to 250, and an average of about 120 people that you're going to. Like, there's your subjects right there.
Right. Is it strictly preschools, or does it expand beyond that?
Okay, great question. So we started out just with preschools, but here's what happens is the preschoolers grow up and then they get into elementary schools and the parents are like, what are these pictures? So we have a lot of requests to do in elementary schools. So that has been the biggest add-on. Mm-hmm. So when we start the franchises out, we start as owner operators, and they're typically in preschools. And then as they get more experience, we want them to grow their teams. And once they start growing their teams, they can take on other types of volume work like schools. So I think the biggest sector that we're going into right now is we love elementary school yearbook, because it's just an easy add-on. The parents already know us from the preschools, and it's great margins. And it's just an easy add-on for once you start building your team.
And how do we overcome as a franchisee the challenge of, a franchisee walking into a preschool or elementary school and saying, we already have a photographer? How do you help them navigate that?
Well, everybody already has a photographer.
Exactly.
So it's so much different now. We have like a systematic kind of high-tech way to get in. In the beginning, it was just like, hey, show up with a box of donuts and say, hi, I'm Melissa. Can I take your pictures?
By the way, that's how we got fields too back in the day for our sports leagues.
Absolutely. Right. So you can't underestimate the power of just a relationship.
Yeah.
Like being a part of your community and knowing people is so important. But I think that once you show them the difference in how joyful the session can be and how much your parents are going to love you because the portraits are amazing, we're just redefining the whole thing. And being able to bring that to a school, especially a local school, you can walk in and say, hey, I'm a local photographer, but look, I've got my stuff together. I've got all these processes and procedures. I can give you everything that the big box guys are providing. Plus, you're supporting a local photographer, and here I am. You have a problem, you call me. It's been very, very, very popular.
That's great. So now let's go back to you, the leadership, and where you plan on, how you want to take the company. You've got 22 franchises. You guys are growing. And I'm curious to know, since you are so system and process oriented, which is fantastic, you just fly by the seat of your pants like some of us did, admittedly. How and when, Melissa, do you think or do you not want to scale more quickly in growth? Yes. I want to kind of hear your thoughts on strategy.
Well, we have figured it out, Frank. We've figured out, I feel like we're right at the tipping point. We are ready to grow. We are ready to take this thing all across the United States. But I'm an engineer. I'm not a salesperson. I am processes and procedures and operations. So just in complete transparency, we've kind of struggled finding the right people in the right location. So very interested in adding people that share our core values. And I think that that's one reason that our growth has been slower than most is, well, one, we're mom and popping it to death. Like we haven't really hired anybody to do anything. We're doing it ourselves. Yes, but we're ready. We think this could revolutionize school pictures nationwide.
Cool. How big is the leadership team?
Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
We have a small but mighty team of 4. Plus, we actually partner with our software provider guys. So we own our own software, which is really cool because when we see something that could improve automation or make things more efficient, we can just call him up and he's vested. He owns part of the company too. So, he's very interested in doing things for us. So we're small but mighty, but we're ready to add.
Nice. And what is your vision for the company? You mentioned nationwide. Do you have goals in mind or milestones that you'd like to hit over a certain number of years? Getting to the 50 number, or how far out do you want to get to that magical 100 franchise locations?
Yeah, so I've always thought that my magic number was 50, but after listening to you, I'm like, okay, I need 100. No, maybe I need 1,000.
More problems happen with more locations,
I know, like having 10 locations versus 20, completely different.
Yeah. It's sort of though, like when you have kids, like, going from 1 to 2. Now we only have 2, but I've heard, once you go from 2 to 3, you're outnumbered anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But my personal experience was, going from 1 to 10 or 1 to 20, that's huge, right? I think really once you clear 20 and you're in that 20 to 50 range, it kind of still feels the same. You're still going to need obviously to add more infrastructure than 4 people. Yes. As you go along the lines. But I thinking back to my company, internally, we didn't look a whole lot different from 20 to 50. Once you start getting north of 50, it starts getting interesting. You add, and then once you get, 100 is really, when you keep hearing this number, the 100 franchise locations, you keep hearing time and time again in the industry for a few reasons. One, that's generally the number when we become royalty sufficient. Right. In your case, you guys sounds like to be really high margins. You're going to be okay. You might get there before then. I don't know your numbers and I don't want to dive into the FDD for the purpose of the podcast. But then the other thing when you're north of 100 is you are definitely among the elite in that, 84% of all franchisors never get to 100 locations. But sometimes that's also the objective of the franchisor, that they don't want to get to 100 or they don't need to get to 100. But, getting to 100 really gets you on the map in terms of if you're trying to expand like way beyond that. But I think going back, slow and steady wins the race. A lot of things I've preached on the podcast has been more like things that I do as I say, not as I did.
Well, we have definitely been slow and steady, but we've added 7 units this year. And my goal was 10.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty short, but I'm not stopping there. And we just need to add 13 next year to make up for it. But we're ready. Like we're ready for growth. We figured out operations. We've got rock solid people working for us. So I feel like we're right at the tipping point. We just need to continue to find the right people that have the same core values and that want to blow this thing up.
Melissa, that's the key thing. It's the right people. And having a leader that's a systems and process leader such as yourself is a huge advantage to your network. So congrats on that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. What's been your biggest surprise since franchising the company?
I guess my biggest surprise is people are different, like completely different personalities can still make it work. So it's very, very interesting because we have that are super outgoing, super fun, party leaders, and they do great. And then we have people that are super shy, more of an introvert. But if they all follow the system and work with their personality, they can still make it work. Mm-hmm. Because in the beginning, like I would kind of poo-poo somebody. I was like, no, they're really shy. They're not going to do whatever. But if they follow the process, completely different personalities can make it work. That's pretty surprising to me.
It's a great characteristic of your franchise is that you don't have to attract any one person. An extrovert can do it, an introvert person can do it. And that's going to allow you, of course, to open the spectrum of a lot more franchise owners as opposed to looking for one. And it's never good to have one type person that has to make it. It shouldn't be that way. If you have the systems and processes in place, which you do, you should be able to open up to, far more people.
Right. I was at franchise conference and I can't remember the speaker that said it, but he was like, franchising is supposed to be for the average person with the average intelligence, with the average motivation can make it work. And I'm like, we have that. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, that's the goal. And like I said earlier, with the systems and processes in place, there's no reason why you can't do that. So I'm curious, what's the investment range of a franchise?
So all in under 60,000.
Under 60.
So less than a new sedan, which is just always crazy to me because people will buy like these $60,000, $70,000 cars that depreciate. And then
Right.
like we talk to people and they don't understand the potential of what you're getting for under 60,000. Like you can have a real business that can change the trajectory of your family. And not only that, have your nights and weekends, be very seasonal in your work. I was like, you could have really, once you get your business up and running, it's so flexible and having a seasonality to it is amazing.
Right.
Letting people understand the potential of it.
And the franchise is territory based, right? Because it's mobile.
Absolutely.
How
Yes.
big is the territory?
So we base it on the number of children aged 0 to 5, but in simple terms, it's about 400 to 500,000 people.
Okay. And across all people, it's a territory of 400 to 500,000 people. Okay.
So we do base it on the number of children because, territories look different because of where they are in their stages of development, whether there's lots of older people living or new families, but basically about 400 to 500,000 people is a territory.
Okay. And your expansion strategy wise, in terms of territory, is there a particular region of the country that you are, leaning towards that you want to grow or spend more time focusing on?
I think that like most emerging franchisors, we're looking for the right people that live in an acceptable territory.
Mm-hmm.
But we are in the Southeast, so we have grown organically from the Southeast more. But Texas, wow, Texas has kind of blown up for us lately. So we're looking for the right people. And if they are in a great territory, I think that with our support systems and the internet now, we can support anybody throughout the United States.
Cool. How did you find your first dozen franchisees? That's like one of the biggest questions I get from founders that are starting out. It's like, okay, how do you get these people? How did you get your first dozen?
The first two were friends of friends, and the third was a friend of a friend of a friend. The fourth and fifth came from a trade show. So we went to a photography trade show. And then the next two came from a portal.
It happens. Back in 2004, 2005, that's like how we got franchises. And then,
Right.
Over the last several years, that's more like a lottery ticket, right? Is the portal. All right. That's great. That's awesome. Yeah. And then what about some of the others?
Some of the others were customers. There's amazing. Like a customer has an experience and then they move to a different location, or it's in a location that has a big enough territory. Mm-hmm. And then we have just recently delved into meta ads.
Right.
Yeah, you took a whole hour about that one, but just trying to do whatever it is that we can to find the right people. But we find that word of mouth is amazing. Our customers are amazing. And then we're doing a lot more towards social media. So I hope you'll go look at all our social media channels. We've got some pretty cool stuff out there that was with some good reach. It's been really good for our local owners. Like they're finding schools calling them other than us, having to show up with the donuts. Like schools are calling them and I want this at my school.
Oh, that's great. Who sells franchises at your company? Is it you? Are you franchise development?
I'm CEO.
Yep. Everything.
Yes. Not really. Well, just recently, my childhood best friend is an empty nester and loves sales. So she's been coming on board to help us with franchise development, which complete transparency, we are for our next hire. Like we need somebody to help us with franchise development because we feel like we've got everything else figured out. We just need help with finding the right people.
And this is just a few different schools of thought. So I'm just merely looking for your opinion here. I don't think there's one right way to do it. But what is your opinion, since there's emerging founders that are listening to the podcast? So I'd love to get your take on your thoughts on using brokers for leads.
So we only tried that one time. And so it was a company to remain nameless. And it was a little daunting because brokers really didn't want to, and at the time our franchise fee was $20,000. Like I didn't feel like they were pushing our brand to anybody just because we were so small and didn't have like a huge fee, I guess. So it was commission. So we have not really gone back to any of the broker networks. I'm not opposed to it. Like if bring us amazing people, I think that would be totally worth it, but we just really haven't gone into it. I think that we were to spend our money like trying to get organic leads, and we were doing SEO and trying to reach out to friends of friends, stuff like that. was more effective, I thought, for us in the beginning.
Good for you. I personally had very mixed results with brokers. I'm not anti-broker, but we gave it a go, more than gave it a go, several times with several different broker groups and spent the time and the money. And we had very mixed results, partly because our concept wasn't something that was it wasn't simple for the broker groups to understand.
Oh, yeah, right.
So they had a hard time communicating it. And if you have a hard time communicating, you're just going to move on and you're going to push something else.
I think so too, because there's not a lot of photography franchises out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's like 4, 5, maybe. So it is not something that people just understand. So I think it's much easier to explain frozen yogurt or something else like that. But
right.
I think that's part of it as well.
And what are your thoughts moving off of the brokers talking about using a franchise sales organization, an FSO, an outside sales company?
I think we need something.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it is that we need, but very interested in keeping our core values intact though. So I think that's been one thing that we have just kind of been hesitant to take on an FSO, because we want to make sure that our brand stays amazing. And we talked to one a couple years back, and they were very interested in us raising our franchise fee and then offering 4 and 5 territories at the very beginning. So doing the multi-pack sales.
Yeah.
And we were like, I don't think we can keep our quality if we do that. We need to we want our franchise owners to buy a 2nd and 3rd territory, but we want them to prove themselves first. I don't know, maybe I was naive because it stunted our growth maybe, but I wanted to make sure that we're keeping the qualities that make it right. So maybe we grow slower, but maybe we grow right. So,
yeah. Well, it's a personal decision. And the nice thing is I can tell just from talking with you that you don't feel like you're under the gun where you have to sell so many franchises to keep the lights on. That's a very stressful way of operating.
We're debt free, and I'm not opposed to taking on debt, but we're debt free. And, if you're going to work with people, why not choose amazing people that you like to be around and share your core values?
Absolutely.
You're going to choose your company, choose people that are going to make your life joyful. Because at the end of the day, if you're not happy and joyful and doing the things that you love, I think you've kind of lost. Like, no matter how much money you make.
Right. Yeah. You need to do something else.
Right. Absolutely.
Good stuff. What's been one of the biggest challenges that you've faced as, a leader of your franchise company? And I'm curious to know how did you overcome it?
I think one of the biggest challenges that I've had is telling people no.
For a potential franchisee?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
And just recently we had somebody that we thought would be great. And initially we said yes. And then we got to know them a little bit better. And then I had to come back and go, I don't think this is going to be great for you. So that was really hard because they were heartbroken. Like they had their hopes set on it. But I was like, I'll help you in a ways, but I just don't think you're right for a franchise owner.
This could be an opportunity for you to give some great advice to founders that are listening. And I don't necessarily mean to use this person as an example, but I'm curious to know, what are some red flags that you've noticed in the past where you're like, this one's not coming aboard?
Right. I think one of the red flags, and this wasn't this particular incident, but one of the red flags is when the person doesn't understand or get your whole operation. So why wouldn't you do sports photography? You can do sports, but that's not our thing. If they're not totally in on children's photography to start out, if they don't think that's going to be amazing and they keep asking you, well, why don't you do this? And you could do this and you could add on this. It's just kind of a red flag that they're not going to follow your processes and procedures, and maybe that they don't believe in them.
Yeah, good for you. Absolutely. Those are great warning signs. And the nice thing about franchising, I've always felt this way, that it's a push-pull relationship, and that we have to listen to our franchisees, because some of the greatest ideas and opportunities come from our franchisees. They're out in the field. But at the same time, if you have somebody that they're not even in the system and they're already saying, I want to do this or I want to do that, and you're expressing to them your objective on how they get started and how they can be successful, and they still have their own way about it, then you're right.
Right. So, and I think that those people will kind of weed themselves out, but just making sure that everyone is moving towards a common goal and believes in the mission.
Right.
And we have that. We have just an amazing family of franchise owners. So just making sure that we keep that mission focus.
If I was a potential franchisee calling you up, what would be a piece of advice that you would give to me if I was exploring your brand?
I would say talk to our owners. talk to as many of them as you can, because they're going to tell you the good, the bad, the ugly. So you can hear it from me and I can tell you all the things, but when you talk to them, you'll know how much support you're going to get. How was training? How hard is it to get accounts? When you need something, is somebody there to answer your questions? So just talking to the people that have done it will give you a much better perspective than talking to us or our friend person. So it's part of our, and I think that's common, right? So people do verification and they talk to the other owners, but I think that that's the best way to know if you're really going to excel and succeed. It is when you talk to our other franchise owners.
Yeah. And we need that. We need the honest feedback from the franchise owners. I always told our franchise owners, you need to tell people the good, bad, and ugly.
Yes.
Of the system. Like, don't sugarcoat it. Yes, we would love to, sell a franchise, but not at the expense of we're bringing people on and we're lying to them. They need to know what they're getting themselves into. I would imagine too, a franchise owner that comes into your system, they need to like kids.
Yeah, absolutely. That's number one. And we've asked that question. Well, why do you want to work with children?
Yeah.
And well, kids are okay. I don't mind them. Like, no.
What do you mean? I don't mind them. That's not the answer.
Or I've never had a problem working with kids. No,
that doesn't sound right. Pass.
No, we are bringing a joyful experience. You can't be joyful working around kids. Please choose another concept, because
for sure. I interviewed somebody recently that said they had a potential franchisee tell them that they didn't like kids, but they were still good with moving forward.
I would say no.
Exactly. No, it's not going to happen.
No, well, not only that, just for them, like, find your thing, please. You're choosing your job. Please find something that suits you.
Yeah. So really your franchisees are dealing with, they're obviously with the kids at the preschool and they're dealing with the teacher. They're not dealing with the parents until it's time to order, right? As the follow-up of the options. And so
typically, yes,
you're in the mom and dad business is really what you're in.
Yes, we have we call it a dual client. So the parents are definitely our clients and the schools are definitely our clients too. So we have to keep both of them happy.
Yep. Well, we have a lot in common that way. That's exactly it.
I guess for you, it's leagues and parents, right?
We created the leagues, but it was the kid. Obviously the kids were, participating, but we were in the mom and dad business and we dealt with all of the venues. So all the schools and parks. Yeah. It was the same dual customer.
Absolutely. And you have to keep both happy. There's certain things that the parents want that this is not really good for the schools.
Right. Yeah, you have to be really, really flexible to be successful in the franchise. You can't be good at one thing.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing though is grit. The persistence and making things work. And when there's a problem, figuring it out.
Yeah. The territories, if I just give my honest opinion, your territories are large enough that it gives franchisees enough runway where if they get rejected by a school, it's not the only school in their entire territory. There's a lot of breathing room for them to deal with rejection. And a no just means a no right now. It doesn't mean next school semester it's a no.
Right. We like to say there's two types of schools, ones that have spoiled rotten photography and ones that will have spoiled rotten photography. Maybe not now, but they will later.
And instilling that in the franchisees, because in a way, you're a business coach.
Absolutely.
Your franchisees, right? I mean, for me, that was like one of the biggest surprises going into franchising. I didn't really give it much thought on how many entrepreneurs, this was their first time in a business. How about for you guys in your franchise? Are most of your franchisees new to having a business or have they done something before? What's kind of the mix look like?
Yeah, a couple of them have. A couple of them haven't done things. And some of them have done multi-level marketing things. Some of them have had small businesses, but I'd say 90% have not. This is their first time. And we actually, one of our people that's on our corporate staff is our second franchise owner she moved and sold her location. So she is kind of like the franchise business coach. We call her the director of franchise owner success. Made that up. But yeah, so we have somebody that's with them every step of the way. We're going to train them. We do almost a month of online training before they get here to their 11 days. Actually, we're starting today for our next training that starts in January. But so we're going to train them well. And then they have this director of franchise owner success. We have weekly meetings. We'll send them to the field when they go and do their first school. So we're with them every step of the way and supporting them best way we know how.
I think you mentioned this earlier, but I want to make sure I heard it right. Are all of your franchisees, is it all owner operated or are they ever somebody who like a manager operated?
Right. So we're 100% owner operated. We want them to build their teams. Like we want them to hire other photographers and teams to go out to scale their own business.
Mm-hmm.
But in the beginning, we want them to be the one that is the standard bearer to be able to teach their photographers that come underneath them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. The only way you're really going to blow this business up, it's got to be something more than you as a franchisee. You've got to scale this and hiring other people.
Absolutely. And that's been a surprise too. I'll just be real transparent.
Yeah.
First 5 years, I was like, no, you don't need to hire another photographer. You're an owner operator. We're doing this for you to be able to support your family and you can make a good living. And then I was like, oh, well, I need to hire a photographer. And then we started blowing our local business up. And I'm like, wow, look how much we can do. Like, this is life-changing.
Sure.
So as we started building our team in our local unit, we're like, okay, you need to add a photographer. And now we talk about that day one. We're like, okay, if you're coming in, we want you to be an owner operator. However, we want you to be a leader and we want you to hire teams because in order to have significant growth, you're going to have people to help you.
Melissa, that is so smart. I went through this very, very similar experience where my franchisees were owner operating in the beginning and then they couldn't get out of their own way.
Right.
And they had a fear then. And it wasn't until we transitioned, because what would happen with our franchise is that our franchisee would open one venue, right? So they would have all of their league games at one location, and to get them to a second location was a daunting task because they would say, I can't be at this two places at once. And then when we realized that obviously the only way you can grow this thing is to scale it. And then we went from one location to 3 locations on purpose because it forced them to scale. And our training changed just as yours has evolved, where we went from owner operated to from day one, explaining that to them. It's a game changer. That's when the network really gets some great growth.
Yes. And last year, I'll give a little plug to Scott Greenberg. We read his book, The Wealthy Franchisee, and sent it to all of our franchise owners. We typically send a book out at Christmas. So just kind of really changed the way people thought about employees and building their team. So it is definitely a focus for us now that it wasn't for us in the early years.
Nice. Melissa, this has been a lot of fun. I'm curious if someone's interested in learning more about the franchise opportunity, where can they get more info?
Sure. Just go to our website, spoiledrottenphotography.com. There is a franchise tab there. We'd love to talk to you. If you love children, if you don't love children, please don't call us.
Exactly. Stay back. Do something else. Yeah. All right. So I always finish here with the tip jar because the franchise community is so generous. So if I was an entrepreneur looking to franchise my concept, what's a piece of advice that you'd give me?
Really 2 things. The first thing is these families' lives, sometimes their life savings is in your hands. Like, if you're not prepared to be that leader that's going to take their money and support them to be an amazing business owner, like if that isn't your why, I would recommend that you not do it. Like, because the legacy, and we've seen it so many times with our brand, like 2 or 3 of our owners, I feel like the legacy of their family, the trajectory has changed because of this business. And that's why you should be in the business, is to help other people. And your success will come too from that, but that has to be your primary thing. And the second thing is just the core values, knowing what your core values are and making sure that you bring people on that are aligned so razor sharp with your own core values. And I think that will help you be successful.
Melissa, that is great advice. I feel you are at the tipping point.
I hope so.
I can feel it. You are doing a lot of things right.
We got work to do.
And you're not afraid to do it.
My dad told me it's 99% elbow grease and 1% smarts. And what you lack in smarts, you can make up with elbow grease.
Absolutely. We're going to use Dad's advice to finish out the podcast. That is probably the best piece of advice we've heard, right?
It's a good one.
It is a great one. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate you being on the show, and I wish you all the continued success.
Oh, Frank, thank you so very much. You are so generous with your podcast, and you're making a difference for us emerging franchisors. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its hosts do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.